I work for the club, and I report, in a manner of speaking, to a guy by the name of Phil Castellini, who's his son of the owner, who is the president of the ball club. But I pretty much, they pretty much let me do my thing. I mean, the older I get, the more crotchety I get, the more lack of patience that I get, and they just give me free rein to pretty much do what I want to do as long as it doesn't embarrass the ball club. We had a president of the club named John Allen. He used to say in social situations, laughingly would say in front of other people with me there, you have to understand the opinions expressed by Marty on the Reds radio network and not necessarily those of club ownership and management. And he would laugh, but he was dead 100% serious. Guys, you know, I used to listen to Bob Prince do the Pirate games. I had an uncle that lived in Pittsburgh, and I'd go up there and watch the Pirates play at Forbes Field. And I didn't think there was anybody like Bob Prince. Vin Scully, I think, is the greatest baseball announcer who ever lived. I don't think there will ever be a better baseball announcer than Vin Scully, with all due respect to Red Barber and Mel Allen and some of the other people. Milo Hamilton, when I came to Salisbury, Milo was doing the Atlanta Braves games, and he and I since have become very, very good friends. He does the Houston Astros games now. But there's some of the people that you know I looked up to when I was young and coming up in the profession.
Stan?
Just a couple of guys that I remember listening to as a kid. I could get WSB radio out of Atlanta and Knoxville, and used to listen to Milo Hamilton call the Braves games, and thus I became an Atlanta Braves fan. But as a kid, and all these guys up here probably have heard John Ward, who did Tennessee games forever, and lived in my neighborhood. And John retired from Tennessee about 8 years ago, maybe 9, something like that. But everybody in Tennessee grew up listening to John Ward. And obviously back then in the 60s and 70s when I was a kid, maybe a game or two was on television. So you relied on the radio to listen to the Tennessee games, especially on the road. I was always at the games at home. And he had this, and he was a very smart person, number one. He had a law degree, was an advertising executive, and just kind of fell into the play-by-play job. But he was so good with language. And he never fell into the rut. Sometimes I'll go back and listen to a tape and I'll say, doggone it, I used to use that word about the 21st time. But John never did that. He always had this uncanny ability to use a different word to say the same thing. And it was John that I got to know of, or got to know personally, because he lived in our neighborhood. And I remember when I got the opportunity to go to Marshall, and I was perfectly happy at Carson Newman. But I called John on the phone and said, John, what do you think? And he said, you know what? He said, if you would like to move on in your career, you're going to have to get some documented proof that somebody else was willing to hire you. And so I took the Marshall job, and it turned out good for me. But some of the other guys, sorry, Howard, but huge Dallas, and Mick, huge Dallas Cowboys fan. And followed the Cowboys as a kid because my father respected Tom Landry so much, so I latched on to the Cowboys. A buddy of mine played for the Cowboys for 15 years, but growing up as a kid, and when you would watch the Dallas games, Pat Summerall was always doing them, and I just thought Pat was a terrific television announcer because he was one of the few I thought that did a great job of letting the pictures tell the story. He added to the video. He didn't just describe the obvious, and I thought he did a terrific job of that.
Howard?
Vin Scully, I'd have to agree, is the best that I've heard, I think, in baseball. The fellow right over there to the left is somebody I wish I could have heard more, but whenever I have heard him, he does a fantastic job. And Marty Brenneman. Football, I grew up listening to Frank Herzog do Redskin games with Sam Huff and Sonny Jurgensen, who are still doing it. In fact, when Frank won a few times the NSSA Awards program, I got to know him, and when I went to Washington and I go there every year at least for 1 or 2 games, he allowed me in the booth and introduced me to Sam and Sonny, and that was a big thrill. But he also did I thought, a great job at play-by-play. I was very not happy that they basically let him go because Larry Michael basically took over the network, and that's why that happened. But those guys were the ones that I grew up and respected, and I try to pattern myself for the best things that the ones that I've respected do, and try to be myself at the same time. That's the way I do things. But those guys are all ones that I've respected and grown to admire.
We have time for one more quick question.
What's the hardest way when you're preparing for a game or when you're doing a post-game interview? Who's been the hardest person to get the information out of, whether it's a coach or a player? Just good question. Any particular person or player?
Before I answer, is anyone here personal friends with John Fox?
That's a good question. I think regardless who the coach is, I think he or she is going to be easier to talk to after a victory. I remember when Skip Prosser got to Wake Forest, and Skip would always come out to do the post-game interview to the table. We didn't go back to the locker room. He came out to where we were. And Skip was great. That first Wake Forest, and Dave's been there, that first Wake Forest loss, I mean, he was so angry, more so at himself than anything else. He didn't like to lose. And he gave you the, yep, nope, which is stimulating radio. But Skip was pretty tough. And then he, in a way, learned, I don't think he ever learned to lose any better, but he certainly learned to deal with us in a better way after Wake had lost a few games. They didn't lose too many when he was there.
Now, for those of you who don't know, I had the opportunity to work with Stan and his crew on Wake Forest football this year as the sideline reporter. First road game of the year at Boston College. Wake is going to win the game in overtime. They're on the 3-yard line, first and goal, fumble the football, BC recovers and wins. I had the great fortune of getting Jim Grobe, first person off, coming off the field, and I could see the smoke coming out of his ears and the fire in his eyes, and I asked him, Coach, what are you going to tell the kids in the locker room? We answered their question, and normally I would follow up. I said, thank you, Coach, see you later. Let him go. He was a little upset. But I want to thank all 4 of our panelists, Howard Platt, Mick Mixon, Stan Cotton, Marty Brenneman. It's been a pleasure, guys. I think we could have probably gone until next Tuesday with questions. I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Good job, brother. Always good to see you, man.